course, is New Business Models for Journalism. My name is George Brock. I'm a journalist, and until recently I was running the J School at City University in London, where I still work. Welcome to this session, and also welcome to all those who are following us on live stream, and thank you in advance to our hard-working interpreters up behind you. We are not going to spend an enormous amount of time doing opening presentations. I'm going to ask each member of the panel if they would just spend 2 or 3 minutes, no more, saying the most useful and interesting things they can think of about new business models for journalism. You don't need me to tell you, I don't think, that what people used to call, I'm glad they don't much anymore, the crisis of journalism was not a crisis about the demand for journalism, or indeed actually a crisis about the supply. It was a crisis about the business model. And we also know, and if we didn't know, we could be reminded by the session with the guy from Facebook yesterday evening, that business models and technology influence greatly everything that happens in journalism. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with the person furthest to my left, your right, who is Mathew Ingram. He is listed, if you happen to be using the old-fashioned hard copy, as from GigaOM. As we say in English, rest in peace. Actually, he should be labeled as from Fortune. Maybe he's going to say a little bit about the business model for GigaOM. We shall see. I will introduce the other members of the panel as they go. Mathew Ingram.
Grazie. Buongiorno. I'm happy to talk about GigaOM at some point, not right now, but during the panel we can talk about the business model, whether it worked, whether it might have worked, whether it should have worked. I think just in general terms, sort of a high-level view of this question, I think if you're a media entity, even an individual media entity, you have to think, so when people ask me, will this model work? What about this model? Will this model work? What about what BuzzFeed does? Will that work? What if I do this? Will this work? I ask them, what do you mean by the term work? What do you mean? So when you say, will it work, what do you mean? Do you mean, will this make me a lot of money? Do you mean, will this help me do journalism? Do you mean, will this help me reach a lot of people with my journalism? Or do you mean all of those things sort of mixed up together? Because those things are very, very different. So one model may work to expand your reach, to reach new readers, to improve the sort of spread of your journalism. One model may work to make you a lot of money. Those models may not be the same thing. So I think you have to think about what is your purpose, why are you doing this, before you start thinking about your business model. Good?
That's it.
I'm done. I'm out.
The next speaker in the line, I love brevity, and that's a hint for everybody else, is Raju Narisetti, who has worked for a number of media outfits, including the Wall Street Journal and Mint in India. But as you will see from the list, he is currently Senior Vice President at News Corp, and was, I think, the person involved in acquiring Storyful, among other things. Raju, you have the floor.
Great. I'll just talk about 2 or 3 issues, and then hopefully we'll come back in the Q&A. As most of you might know, News Corp is, it runs the Wall Street Journal, the Times of London, and a bunch of papers in Australia. We've always believed in charging for our journalism, so that business model continues to be a model we believe in. It's expanded over the years, and we now look at our audiences in kind of 4 distinct buckets, if you will. The first one, we like to call them visitors, and these are people who come through a Google search or a Twitter link or any other place, and they typically spend a minute and a half, maybe read something very quickly, don't leave behind anything, if you will. So, and it's important to have a big number of those people. That's the top of the funnel, if you will, because for advertising and other reasons. And then we think of a next set of people as what we call as readers. These are people who spend more time on our journalism, often in return have given us, have registered, given us an email, come back, so we know a little bit more about them. So visitors, readers, And then the third set of people are subscribers. These are people who have paid for our journalism, whether it's annual subscriptions or any other form. They've actually given us cash. So up until about a couple of years ago, that was the model. Increasingly now, we've added a fourth bucket of how we look at our audiences, and that's called members. So think of it as visitors, readers, subscribers, and members. Members are essentially subscribers who are offered a lot of other benefits, if you will. We are trying to kind of create an ecosystem saying, you're a Wall Street Journal subscriber, you're part of a relatively small group of people, but because of that, we actually kind of give you a lot of benefits. And some of these are very tangible benefits, like events that they have access to, or behind the newsroom kind of tours, or we leverage our other businesses. We own, HarperCollins, the publisher, so you could get a bunch of books as part of your membership. Trying to create a sense of belonging so that every year we just don't go back to them and say, please renew your subscription. Make them feel kind of somewhat unique and special, and in return give them a lot of benefits. And we see a lot of value in kind of treating our subscribers that way. So this idea of visitors to readers to subscribers to members is driving pretty much everything we do, because conversion has become the key metric that we measure. So that has become kind of an extended layer of an existing paid business model. And then I'll just talk about one thing, and then because George wants brevity. There isn't nothing new, but there has to be a relentless focus on costs. You've got to kind of match your costs to your usually declining advertising revenues or your declining businesses. And that is a recurring new business model. Every year you take a pretty hard look at how much you're spending and can you kind of balance that. So those are the two elements that we are fairly focused on right now. Thank you.
Raju, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to say that on this panel we have not one, but two people who have started new news businesses from the Netherlands, that energetically entrepreneurial country. I'm only sorry we don't have an example from Spain, which is also doing a lot of very interesting things at the moment, but there wasn't quite room for that. The first one of these to speak this morning is Ernst-Jan Pfauth, who is the publisher. You think of publishers as old men. No longer. Jan is the publisher of the Correspondent, and he's going to tell you about it.
Hello, everybody. So at the Correspondent, we have a really complicated business model. We make the journalism we believe in, and our members pay for it. That's basically the deal. We're really straightforward with that. We don't have any advertisers. We decided not to join the ads race to the bottom because, well, all the ad budget is going to social networks anyway. And more importantly, we decided that we wanted to fully focus on the needs of our members. So if you have advertisers, you basically have to turn them into a target group you have to turn your members into a target group for advertisers. And well, we don't, so we can do whatever we think is necessary for our members, and we don't have to take any other stakeholders into account. These members pay 60 euros a year, and for that they get full access to the site, which we can show you right now. There it is. They can comment, they get discounts for our events, and well, what we see them is basically as expert contributors. So all our members have a certain expertise, and we ask them to share that underneath our articles. That's basically our business model.
Fourth and last introductory speaker, also from the Netherlands, is Alexander Klöpping. I hope I have pronounced the good correct. Thank you. And he founded Blendle. Alexander.
Thank you. So about a year ago, we launched Plendil in Holland, which is basically, before I was a journalist like many of you in this room, and I decided it's so strange that my friends are now willing to pay for movies with Netflix, and they're willing to pay for music with Spotify, but still they're not willing to pay for journalism. I don't know a lot of young people are willing to pay for journalism, and that's a problem. At the same time, there are still no platform where you can get all the newspapers and the magazines in a country just in one system, with one registration, with one wallet to pay for it all, without needing the need for subscriptions, without advertising. There was no experience of consuming long-form content that I really wanted to have. So we waited, and at some point we just decided, all right, what if we try to get this in Holland? What if we try to build a system like we want to use it, and basically get all the publishers on board? And that was a struggle. We did that for a couple of years, and we were told no many times. But now we're live next week for a year, so we're having our first anniversary. And we're at 250,000 users right now in the Netherlands, of which 1 in 5 actually start topping up their account to pay for this stuff, which is really awesome. And what's even more cool is that about 2/3 of the people are under the age of 35, people normally who don't pay for journalism. And I can show you what it looks like a little bit. So this is my firewall. You can get, that's great. How the PowerPoint works. Yes. So at Plendil you pay per article. You only have to pay for the stuff that you actually are reading. And all the cards are shown, all these articles, they're there because they're recommended by friends of yours. A friend can recommend a story to you if from a newspaper or magazine that he likes. And it's styled in the style of the original newspapers. This is from newspaper The Volkskrant in Holland, which is basically the Guardian of Holland. And you pay 25 cents for this article. Most articles are around that price. You can read it. If you didn't like the article, you can ask for your money back, which that's a feature that people often find very interesting. But it's actually quite serious, because when you do micropayments, which is basically what we do, and which gives journalism nerds always a little bit like, ooh, micropayments, this is going to fail. But this is basically the reason why it's working for us, I think, because micropayments until now always were there was a lot of friction. You had to choose to buy an article, and then you weren't sure it was going to be worth your money. So what we did at a Friday afternoon, we just decided, what if we just give people their money back if they didn't like the article? So we went to the publishers, and they thought we were crazy, and we just kept repeating what we wanted. And in the end, everyone agreed, because in the end, we knew people are going to spend way more if they know in the back of their minds that they are comfortable with what they're doing. So the micropayment of the refunding thing works. Just 2 to 5% of articles get refunded. But in the end, many more people consume articles or consume journalism per article. You can also buy the whole or read the whole newspaper in the print editions if you want to. But mostly it's us helping you find the content of all the newspapers and the magazines in Holland. And we'll be expanding that to other countries this year.
Okay, I'm going to just ask each of these panelists one question before we throw it open for discussion. Mathew, you talked about thinking clearly about what works. Give us one specific example of somebody...
Not what works, what you want to do.
Okay, thinking really clearly about what it is you want to do. Give me your best example of somebody who's thought most clearly about that.
Who thought most clearly, or who was the most successful?
Either or both.
Well, I don't want to flatter my fellow panelists too much, but I think the Correspondent has done a great job.
Thank you, Mathew.
What I liked about them, even in the earliest days, was that it was a very, very clear message, a very, very clear sort of value proposition. So we're going to do this. We want to serve you, and in return, you pay us. So nothing else in the way, a very sort of straightforward, so no advertisers, no kind of complications, just us doing this and you seeing value and giving us money.
I'll come back to Correspondent in a second, but first, Raju, you talked about membership. Other than your own company, who else has done membership well?
I think it's not a new concept. I think you heard him talk only about members, right? There's not a notion of subscribers. The New York Times has been trying to do it for a while. I don't think a lot of publishers have done it well, and I don't claim that we are doing it well. We are experimenting and figuring out what works. Part of it is because I think we have never valued our readers beyond either being a reader or writing a check or paying. We never kind of took them past that because we were very happy saying, we have great content, pay for it, and every year we will hit you up with either a price increase or we'll kind of beg you to renew. And there was a massive churn rate. And we managed the churn rate, meaning that X% of people would drop off and we would write 4 letters to them and give them deals and try to get them back. You spend a fortune trying to keep your existing subscribers. What we discovered was that if you make them think of the subscription price as only a part of something else, that they get a lot of other features, and the retention goes up quite a bit. So the amount of money I'm spending on trying to keep them is way over than the money I'm trying to spend on giving membership benefits. So there's been a very pragmatic business decision, and it also makes them feel special. I mean, we knew that if you're a paid subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, you do belong to a particular set of people, whether it's income or your interests. Now we are like really positively reinforcing that message and building loyalty at a time when readers can go pretty much anywhere they want to, beyond just kind of saying, here's great content, pay for it.
And I will say, if membership is your goal, if that's the sort of model that you're building around, you have to live that in everything you do. It can't just be a slogan. The best part, or one of the good parts about the Correspondent, is if you're a member, they don't just have comments, below the story where you can express your dumb opinion or whatever. They see you as a contributor, as a partner, as someone who can contribute to the actual goal of the institution, not to just someone who shows up and clicks and you make money from them. That's crucial.
Yeah. Ernst-Jan, Mathew paid tribute to the clarity of your proposition. A lot of other people would love to have the proposition, we do the journalism and you pay for it.
Right.
Why is that working for you, or why is that working in the Netherlands when other people are struggling to make that happen?
Well, I think because we don't make any compromises. And for example, if our retention rate is 90%, and maybe one of the reasons is just because when your membership is about to end, we will send you an email with this pie chart, and we show you exactly how we spent your 60 euros. So this makes the member feel really involved because they can exactly see how almost 32 euros went to the salaries for the editorial staff and freelancers. So by really involving them in our decision making, in our journalism, you feel like you're more like you're part of a movement instead of just a subscriber to a publication. So I guess that is really important. And we also started out as with a crowdfunding campaign. So we don't have any like venture capitalist investors. We have one foundation that invested, but other than that, it's all members. So when we had this plan, we basically, Rob, our editor-in-chief, Rob Weinberg, wrote a 10-piece manifesto saying this is our idea. We had a logo, we had a couple of names, that was it. And we organized a crowdfunding campaign, and we asked 15,000 people to give us 60 euros for a year, and if they wanted to donate more, that's of course okay. And to our astonishment, after 8 days, we reached that goal. And after the campaign ended, we had almost 19,000 people who gave us 60 euros. So we started out as a movement, and I guess that's in our DNA now, and that's why members feel really involved, and that's why they stick with us, because every time we have an article that is a success, because our members can share our articles with whoever they like. Every time we have an article that is a success, we get new members, because we ask them why, and they say, well, I believe we need more stories like this one, so that's why I signed up and gave you my 60 euros.
Thank you very much. Alexander, same kind of question. A lot of people have struggled to do micropayments. Why have you made it work when other people haven't? What's your X factor?
It's a good question. I think it's a combination of things, actually. Like the refund thing I talked about, it's important to us. Yep. But it's also the fact that if you have one platform that has all the content in a country, That's a really exciting thing. Like at Spotify, it's kind of magical that when you enter an artist, you know it's going to be in there. And at the same time, it's going to help you find, music that you haven't listened to and that might be interesting for you because the algorithm has decided so. Friends of you who have found out about a new artist that they want to listen to the songs to. Like the system, the platform helps you discover content that's interesting to you. And this is really important to us because like a lot of people have one newspaper but never read anything out of other newspapers. Like Blendle is great for that because then you have your newspaper, you can connect your subscription and read your own newspaper for free in Blendle and then read the other newspapers or magazines on a per article basis. And it might be so that, a famous politician or someone that you have an interview is with in a newspaper or in a magazine, you want to read, you desperately want to read, but you don't want to buy the whole thing. So there's already this urge to read this article, but if we help you find it, if it's very easy to pay for it, then you might just do the one click and always know that you can get your money back. And that seems to be working quite well for us. So this combination of discovery, at the same time making it very, very easy to pay, completely frictionless, that is a combination that has worked very well for us.
Just tell us in one sentence what the software is that's so frictionless.
We built the software.
You built your own. Okay.
Yeah, and it's every day we're like, this is not something that we just bought and then we're like, all right, this is what we're using. We have a team of 30 developers right now, men in black t-shirts and beards, because that's how developers are supposed to look.
It's a uniform.
Yes, and they are building this platform, and every day we're finding out how we can get more people to enjoy this stuff. So, for example, one thing that we did is we found out at some point that if people run out of credit, they get €2.50 for free when they sign up, €2.50. And when they run out of credit, they have to top up. They have to top up their account. And 1 in 5 do, but I want more people to top up. So one of the things we started doing recently is, at that moment where really you cannot read the article anymore, but you really want to because a friend has recommended it and you're like, I want to read this. We're giving you that article for free. And we're basically telling you, you're getting this for free now. We really aren't supposed to do this, but here you go. And then at the end of the article, we try to say, you got this for free. How about, doing a little bit back? And that's working really, really well. And stuff like that, we just push every week. So I'm not under the... Blendle isn't set in stone right now. It's completely different like it was a year ago. It will be completely different in a year probably. That's because we're just launching features every week, seeing what works, seeing what gets young people to pay for journalism. So basically the idea of not having an idea what the hell you're doing is really working quite well for us.
Okay, so it's an experiment on the run. I just
Yes.
want to pursue this point about the parallel between music and news, though, because the pricing of music and news can't be exactly the same. If I buy an album, I'm paying a price for something that I will listen to over years. News, I'm likely to read only once. So
Yeah.
the pricing is not the same, is it? Just explain how you
No, not at
distinguish
all.
the two.
No, so most of the articles, the prices can be set by the publishers. So most newspaper articles are between 10 cents and 30 cents, so it's quite cheap. And you never pay more than a single issue would cost, because we cap the user. So a user can...
Journalists, please note.
Yeah, they can never feel screwed. That's basically why we do that. And at the same time, you have a notion of how much you spend every month. So you have this feeling of control. At the same time, know that you get your money back. So that combination of things makes people feel comfortable with the pricing. And obviously, it's quite different than music. It's journalism. Definitely, it's a different product. But at the same time, just consuming content and paying for it doesn't have to be annoying. That's what we're showing. Like in the App Store right now, it's quite easy to just buy your app. It's really easy to do that. And you're not feeling much friction anymore. That's because Apple is one account and it's all quite nice. It's a really nice product. And that feeling we try to mimic.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Mathew.
Alexander, why do you think micropayments haven't worked before for news?
Honestly, because all the implementations were pretty crappy.
Okay.
Okay, the importance of execution. Ladies and gentlemen,
I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah.
It's time for questions and discussion, and I'm fairly confident that there are microphones roving the room. Please, if you would just identify yourself and your affiliation when you ask a question. We're going to start with Felix Simon.
Oh, man.
Who I can identify already.
I have a question about these micropayments. To what degree is it possible that it might work in the US or the UK where things are much more based on credit cards? It's one of your secrets that because people are paying out straight out of their checking accounts, that the fees per payment are much, much lower than they would be with a credit card.
So this is a big question for us, and honestly, I'm not so sure. Like, we signed, what's the New York Times and Axel Springer were investors of ours a couple of months ago. So it was quite easy to get the New York Times on board too on the platform. So we'll add them quite soon, as well as the Wall Street Journal, which I'm really proud of, as well as the Washington Post. We already got the Economist, and we're building up this portfolio of huge American and British companies to be on the platform and working together with them. So that basically sets this stage where at some point we just have to translate the interface into English and see, all right, what happens if we just do this outside of Holland and do this in English for a US market or any other markets? And this is going to be the question, right? Is doing great discovery combined with making it so easy to pay for stuff, is that something that a lot of Americans are interested in?
And when exactly are you going to do this, Alexander? I want to be ready.
I'm not. We're not sure yet. Honestly, this just depends on when we can sign these publishers, and it's going quite fast now. Like these 4 huge publishing companies, they signed, and that makes stuff a lot easier getting other publishers on board. But the idea that you have one wallet to pay for it all and having only transaction costs when you top up your account, that enables us to do this quite nicely. And whether this will be something that people in the US are interested in, I don't know. We're just going to try.
Well, it's a reassuring thought that a lot of film companies, music companies are always using the Netherlands as a testing country to see if it works, then they will launch it worldwide. So I really cling to that thought. We have 33,000 members now in the Netherlands. We hope to grow to 50,000 this year. And then at some point we'll have to look abroad as well. So we're now thinking about launching in the US in 2016. It's not sure, but we're thinking about it. And we'll see whether it works. But it's the question you always get. This works in the Netherlands, right? But not abroad. And well, let's figure it out.
Well, it's like people always think that the people of Holland are quite crazy. Maybe they are. That's just the reason why we're here. That could be true. But at the same time, like, it's working well. Both our platforms are working quite well in Holland. So, you know, I have no reason to believe it will be much harder in Germany or France, for example.
But do either one of you think that the language barrier is a sort of natural barrier, like a natural kind of, not protection, but to some extent insulates your service from more competition because there's a language barrier?
Oh, there's definitely a competitive advantage if you launch on a per country basis, and that's definitely what we're going to do. The next country we're launching, we have all the newspapers and the magazines will announce that quite soon, which the next big country will be that Blendle will
Can
launch
you give us a hint?
I will not.
Which direction? Which direction?
But it will have basically all the newspapers and the magazines, and like, it is an advantage other than launching an international version. But at the same time, I mean, there is also a lot of stuff in Holland. Dutch people get overwhelmed by media. There is a lot, and still the Correspondent works. People are still willing to pay for that stuff. The same for Blendle. So I'm not sure, but we're definitely going to try.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the Wall Street Journal has signed up and it's participating. For us, it's an experiment, but also more interested actually in seeing if an individual story can convert people into subscribers. So it's less about making X cents on a story to see if this platform also leads to conversion, because we track pretty closely individual stories and how they turn people into subscribers. And so giving up that would be a fatal mistake for us, but we are willing to experiment to see if that same model can work on somebody else's platform.
I was going to ask about that. Presumably in both cases, Ernst-Jan and Alexander, you're gathering a lot of extremely valuable data about your customers and what they do.
Yeah. I don't have time to look at the data yet because we're still, just like Alexander said, we're still building all the time and still building stuff. I mean, we're about to launch a search feature after 18 months. So we're really busy with building the platform. And at some point when we feel like we got it all under control, I'll start looking at the data.
Okay, next question, please. Right, back there in the middle.
Hello, my name is Simone Spezia. I'm a journalist for Radio 24. It's the radio owned by Il Sole 24 Ore Group. If you are not sorry, I'll make my question in my mother language. It will be clearer also for you.
Hang on a minute.
Allora, la mia domanda è questa, è per Alexander, ma forse andrebbe fatta agli editori olandesi. Vorrei capire se questo sistema, se Blendle, sta cambiando il modo nel quale i giornalisti scrivono i loro pezzi. Perché da un lato abbiamo una sorta di package tradizionale, che è il giornale, che tu compri interamente e all'interno del quale la qualità degli articoli può essere differente. E quindi se c'è, grazie a Blendle, una tendenza in finanza direbbero fly to quality, cioè una tendenza al miglioramento della qualità degli articoli scritti, perché sai che è quell'articolo che viene venduto. Ho una seconda domanda. Trovo interessante che i due esperimenti più curiosi, più interessanti e più avanzati vengano dall'Olanda. Vorrei capire se c'è un motivo particolare, una congiunzione astrale o qualcosa di questo genere.
It's the water.
No, it's just, it's not Holland, it's just one group of
We
friends.
should repeat the question,
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry, let me just do the question quickly. In summary, the first question was, is this way of buying journalism driving a trend towards quality? Second question was, what is it in the water in the Netherlands that makes you so entrepreneurial and successful? Or is it something in the air?
Coffee shops.
I'll do the first one and you do the second one.
Sure.
So, one of the things that is not working on Blendle quite well, two things actually, that are not working really well on Blendle, article-wise. It's the news. The news doesn't get sold quite well. And that's a good thing to say, I guess, because the long-form stuff, the analysis, the background, the opinions, I don't know, that stuff works really well. The news doesn't. At the same time, what also doesn't really work quite well is clickbait. Because the people click on the stuff, but they ask for their money back. So whenever a journalist tries to do a piece with 8 reasons because, you know, bunnies are fun animals to look at, you will click it. As a human, you have to, but you will not spend your money on this. And this is interesting. So in the end, when we look at the rankings of what's been working well in a month, it's actually the investigative journalism. It's actually the long-form pieces where journalists have been working on for quite a long time. And this is something that makes journalists in Holland quite happy, because it feels like it's a path to the bottom where the guy with the greatest headline is going to win. That stuff cannot work when you have the refund thing in place. So that's interesting. And I do believe, to some extent, it has some influence on how journalists write their articles in a good way.
We have the same experience because we don't really care about page views because we don't have any ads to sell. So all we care about is, if our members appreciate our writing. So we follow our gut basically when we're writing. What is important to know is that we don't write about the stuff that happens just today. We try to write about the stuff that happens every day. So we ignore the news and basically write about things our correspondent in education or correspondent Europe or correspondent healthcare finds important. The developments that probably have a bigger influence on your life, but you regularly don't read about it in the newspaper. And I mean, it's not even that easy to digest. We have articles that are 2,000 words, and people still read it, and people still share it with their friends. So one reassuring thought is that people are really interested and are really willing to make an effort. And you would think otherwise because of all the clickbait all around us. But I think that's just not true. And concerning your question about the Netherlands, Well, it's actually just one group of friends. You could limit it down to just a group of friends. So I'm not sure if it's the country, but if I have to give analysis, I guess, what Rob, their editor-in-chief, was sitting right over there, and Alexander and I have in common is that we got a chance to experiment at a very young age at existing newspapers and television shows. So I guess you were 21, 22 when you became the tech correspondent for the best watched talk show in the Netherlands. Rob was 27 when he became the editor-in-chief of print morning newspaper. I was 24 when I became the digital editor-in-chief of NRC Handelsblad. So I guess we all got a chance to experiment at a young age, and we owe that to the people who gave us that chance.
And speaking generally, I wish it were a problem that journalists were paying attention to data. You know, it would be a happy problem for me to have. I don't think we do enough of that. We are probably unique in kind of the history of many industries that...
Sorry, Raju, you're talking about customer data, yeah?
Yeah, readership data. Or
user data.
Right. We are a very unique industry in the sense that we are probably the only ones who actually don't pay attention to our consumers, right? We think that somehow understanding what they like and don't like and kind of meeting those needs is beneath our profession. It's a very interesting, weird problem that we have. If we survived because in the newspaper world, there wasn't enough real-time data, right? Readership surveys took months. They were not particularly good. And we've stuck in that model, and now we fight the notion that somehow if we understand our readers and serve them better, that is somehow anti-good journalism.
We can see at the same time, we do a dashboard where publishers can check how often stories are being read, for how long, what kind of people do read the stories. So we have kind of a Google Analytics for Blendle. But we do analytics on when the publishers visit that portal. So we know which publishers are the ones paying attention to the data. It's kind of a meta.
And the only thing I would say about data is you become what you measure. So you should be very careful about which metrics you pay attention to. If you pay attention to page views, you will optimize for page views. If you pay attention to conversion, you will optimize for conversion. Just be careful which ones you focus on.
I totally agree. We don't look at page views data or stuff like that. But we do talk with our members every day. All our correspondents are talking with our members, asking them for their input. So today we introduced a new correspondent, and he writes about the police. And he announces his research question basically, and asks people to join in. I should give a different example. My favorite example is when we announced a porn research project. So we wanted to know what the money flows in the porn industry were, and we announced this, and we told our members, well, we organize a sort of a hackathon on Saturday at our news floor. Come join us. And so a porn addict walked in, a porn producer, a researcher who could help us figure out the data flows, but also a porn actress. And they were all members of the Correspondent, and they were all sharing their info. This was done anonymously, of course, at our news floor, but on our website we see it every day. So today we see police officers joining in, talking about their experiences. So what I'm trying to say is that we don't really look at the classical data, but we are in touch with our members every day. We know what they want to read. We know what they have to offer, and I guess that's our most valuable metric, so to say.
And I think again, that's if membership is what you're optimizing for, you have to do that. You guys do real life events too, right? Mm-hmm. Where people come and
every 2 months or so.
Okay, we have a question down here at the front. Can you just put your hand up, and then the guy with the microphone can see where you are.
Nothing about Gigo?
There. You got it.
In Italian language.
We'd prefer it in English up here.
Luigi Salsini, Cal News e ANSA Live, l'agenzia italiana per l'informazione. La mia domanda è rivolta a te ed è questa, cioè a voi che realizzate, diciamo...
Alexander.
Sì, Alexander. Su questa ricerca attraverso gli utenti che sono poi quelli che acquistano le news, quando c'è cosa acquistano i vostri utenti e cosa vi fa guadagnare? Cioè qual è la notizia che vende e vi fa guadagnare, vi porta più introiti economici?
So what kind of articles work really well on Blendle? That's basically the question. It's I kind of got into that before. The news doesn't work. Just what happened. What does work is why it happened. And most of the time that's articles that do a lot of analysis, background pieces, columns do really well, especially if they're written by famous columnists. I think the stuff that would work well on the Wall Street Journal website. It's not very different in that sense. What is different is that an extra layer is that if friends have recommended a story to you, that's really powerful. What's really powerful is we have a lot of famous Dutch people on Blendle recommending stories. So you can basically say, right, I want to follow economics or, I don't know, the financial news. And we have a very famous TV financial journalist curating from all the newspapers and the magazines. We have a TV reporter doing that. We have an ex-owner of a bank. And they are the ones who are curating that topic for you. And when they say this is great, that is the moment that a lot of people will buy it on Blendle. So the kind of stories I've said, but there's also this way of how do people then get the stories from the big database. And that's the way that's working. And sometimes it's the smaller magazines with a really, really powerful article, just one, making more money than a big newspaper. So it's a really weird dynamic in that sense.
Raju, can you tell us which stories convert well for the journal?
To subscriptions, you mean?
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of drill it down. I mean, I know at a story level after the fact, it's hard to kind of be very generic about it. Obviously, stories that are deeper analysis or for us, breaking news stories actually do fairly well because, for example, if there's a big deal that might happen in 2 days and we have a 2-day lead time in kind of saying so-and-so company is buying, and that's often behind a paywall, even if others are having that news nugget and can report it, we find that at that moment there's a set of people really wanting to read that story. And they are willing to then say, okay, we'll sign up for membership. And there was a story about 6 months ago that was about it was an essay really about the existence of God. And it was like a big, long essay. I forget who wrote it. And that ran in the opinion section. That single story had 76 new subscribers. And you can imagine, like, these are people willing to pay $200 to $300 a year. And
it wasn't by the Pope or anything like that.
No, it was somebody who's actually, I forget its name, somebody who's actually a well-known figure writing about religion. But it's very critical for us because if you get a new subscriber, on average, they tend to at least stay for 3 years before you get into an issue of whether they will resubscribe or not. So you can imagine the value of a single story multiplied by, let's say in this case, 76 people into $250 into 3 years is a lot of money, while if the same article was on Blendle, and if 10,000 people had read it, I would still get like a few $100s. So that's the issue for us in disaggregating our model and kind of putting stories out there. The other issue for us is that we believe there is actually value beyond the individual story for people coming to the Wall Street Journal. There is a curation value, there is a hierarchy of these are the most important stories versus this, there's a presentation value, and all of that somewhat gets lost if individual stories are out somewhere else. So it's a tricky proposition. It's worth experimenting because if a lot of the audience is doing that, you don't want to miss out on it. But we have to be very, very, very careful because the long-term value of stories for us is significantly higher if we convert them into subscribers.
I agree, but this is a good point. It's the issue of cannibalization, really. Mm-hmm. Like, will Blendle make sure that people cancel their subscription or won't get a subscription anymore? Which is an important point for us, obviously. When the moment comes that publishers starting to see, all right, this is bad for business, I am very sure I won't be sitting here next year anymore because then everyone will pull out. At the same time, what I hope is that this notion where you just follow links on the internet and get bumped into paywall, onto paywall, onto paywall. That there's people taking a subscription, apparently, but there's also
Really, not apparently.
no, yeah, there's people taking a subscription, but then also there's a lot of people who are annoyed and that are bouncing, and
that's
we're
the
really
value.
trying to combine those two. And what we, for example, do is if we see that people have bought a lot from a specific newspaper or magazine, that's the moment when we'll say, you know, do you want to read this unlimited? Because it's much more cheap for you. You get the whole experience of the Wall Street Journal. It's not just these articles, but it's also their website and the membership and the whole package you get then, not just Blendle anymore. So it's actively trying to upsell people to.
Yeah, it's a lead gen experiment as opposed to a readership experiment.
That hurts my heart a little bit because it's much more. But yes,
lead
that's
gen
part
is
of it.
good.
Raju, can I just go back to something you were saying? You were talking about two categories that did really well, which I'll call market-moving information and extremely interesting long reads. When you see these trends, do you think, notwithstanding what you say about the value of the brand and how people see it overall, do you think that those trends in what people prefer will change the editorial shape and personality of the journal over time?
It could and maybe it should, but the way it works currently is that this level of data is not necessarily shared with everybody. It's shared with a certain set of people.
Good of you to share it with us.
Right? So there isn't like an automatic everyday report that goes to the entire newsroom that says this story converted so many people. There's a set of editors who see it. It's less, the predictive part about our readers' behavior is still very, very hard and very subjective. Meaning that if one story on the existence of God did very well, and a week later we said, okay, let's do one more story, chances are very, very high that the other story actually will bomb, right? Sure. So that's the difficult part to kind of link this to any, but long term, absolutely. I mean, when I was at the Washington Post, we had to make tough decisions. This was the pre-Jeff Bezos era of like, where would we cut? One of the things we did was to look at overall years worth of data and said that we can reduce by one staffer in city government coverage, because that doesn't seem to kind of do very well. But we could tell that if we did that in education, we would have a significant impact. So I think at that level, this data is useful. It's less so at a granular level. Will it eventually lead to a point where a lot of performance and a lot of like compensation and a lot of behavioral issues are linked to data? Long way away from there. But there are examples. For example, at one of our newspapers in Europe, the social media team usually is measured by the number of likes, the number of retweets, the number of, those kind of things. And we've actually said to the team, social media also converts very well for us into subscriptions. So we've said we will measure the social media team's output also based on the number of people who are clicking on a Twitter or Facebook conversion and then converting. So that's become now a metric for that team. So there are ways you can see the kind of needle moving towards using more metrics, but it's far from actually using that for shaping journalism.
And obviously, conversion only works if you have something to convert people to. So if you are totally advertising supported, the only conversion you can think of is does someone click through and buy something, which is often harder to track.
But I would never make cutbacks based on data, to be honest. If I had to make cutbacks, God forbid, I'd ask the editor-in-chief, which is a subject that isn't that important, which we can let go. But if I'd look at the data, I should cut all the stories about the European Union, but they're really important to us because they influence our lives in a heavy way. I should cut all the stories about forgotten wars, which are forgotten for a reason and which we are trying to change. So that's exactly the way I wouldn't use data. I would ask the journalists, well, what's the subject we can miss? What's the least important subject? And I wouldn't look at if people like it or not.
The fundamental problem with our industry and the reason why we are in such a bad shape is this disdain for data, which essentially is what our audiences want, right? We have run this industry in what I call the tummy compass, which is the gut feel, as opposed to understanding our audiences. I totally buy the fact that there is subjective element, but if we do a story on forgotten wars, and if the data is telling us that only 50 people have clicked on it, the problem is not with the readers, right? The problem is that we have decided something is important, but we have written, presented, packaged it in such a way that most readers didn't care. So you use data to improve the engagement on a story that you think is important. You don't use data to stop doing those stories. I think that's the way data ought to be managed. But the problem in our industry is that we will use data, we won't use data ideology, right? It is less about that. It's about saying, if you think the European Union is important, you've put 5 reporters, you've done a bunch of stories, but if data is telling you nobody is reading them, you've got to do something about it, right? It's not stop doing those stories.
Sure, but I wouldn't fight a journalist. I would try everything to
Sure.
which we're doing now to make the stories
But
more
my
appealing.
point is that if you have to choose between having a couple of journalists less, for whatever reason, I would rather also use data rather than just rely on an editor saying, he goes, he stays.
But I think
No,
you
I
would.
wouldn't. No.
Matthew.
I think you would probably also ask your members, right?
Sure, that's data,
What
right?
yeah.
That's my point. We have this notion of data somehow being bad. All it is what are our customers, our paying customers, telling us about what they like, don't like, what they want more of, less of. It is our job to tell them, even if you don't like this, this is important. But you can't force them to read it unless the experience is good. And that's where data is useful.
Next question, please.
But
They
editors
all
know
seem to
what's
be
good.
on this side, so on the edge there. That's it.
Hi, Fabio Malagnini, freelance journalist. I'm speaking Italian. 2 domande ad Alex. Una, volevo chiedere qual è il ciclo di vita medio di un articolo sul loro servizio, cioè per quanto tempo risulta appetibile all'acquisto. La seconda, se prevedono di aprire anche contenuti, come dire, freelancing o comunque diciamo di giornalisti indipendenti o sempre di passare. La terza, visto che all'inizio giustamente citava Spotify o Netflix come modelli in altri ambiti, questi sono modelli però a subscription che vanno attraverso un po' tutta l'offerta. Se pensano di testare in futuro una subscription anche loro. Invece per Correspondent volevo chiedere se sono previsti delle forme di partecipazione degli iscritti paganti alla vita di redazione, quindi in forma di voting piuttosto che di qualche altro tipo.
Yeah, do you want back to 4-1 or?
Sure, that sounds great.
Then you start.
Okay. So the question was, will you ask your members to decide about reporting, about what to report about, or let them vote on certain subjects? Well, so right now our journalists are conversation leaders and our members are contributing experts, and they're working together. But the initiative, what to write about, is still completely with our journalists. So that the decision what to write about is one way. It's a one-way direction. And what we want to do now is move from a publication, which we still are, to more like a platform. So we will give our members the opportunities to start collections of themed collections, and they can add our stories to it. Let's say a police officer starts a collection, corruption in police. This is not an. I'll use another example. A teacher has a collection about innovation in education, and he can add the stories he likes about in the correspondent, but he can also add reports from different media, or he can write notes about his own experience. And by doing this, we will use those collections as feelers for what's happening in society. So our editors can then check out these collections. They can verify the collections. They can call the member, ask whether he's really a teacher, check it like a normal journalist would, and then highlight the collection. And by doing this, we will allow our members to also steer the direction of our reporting. We're still sketching it out, but I hope when we come back next year, who knows, we can share the first results.
So you had 3 questions. The latter one was, will you do a flat fee model instead of buying per article? The answer to that question is probably not, because it's doable, I think, for magazines, but for newspapers it will get way too expensive, just in practice, because one newspaper already is quite expensive. So doing a flat fee, publishers don't really like that. I'm ready for it technology-wise, but I don't have the feeling this will start quite soon. The second is, will you allow freelancers on the platform? We actually are. There needs to be a collective of freelancers, so we don't take on individual freelancers, but as a collective, you can decide, I'm a publisher right now, and that's the moment that we'll have you on if we have the technical capabilities. Because right now we're being swamped by publishers, and I have only 40 people, and they don't sleep that much right now, so I cannot do anything, not all of the things. And the last one was, what is the living time of a story? Like, how long after a story came out does it still get sold? And that's really hard to say on average. I would say on average, the stories that get read, there's also a lot of stories that never get consumed. Like on Spotify, there's many songs that haven't been listened to once, which is sad, but it's true. When a story gets popular, it tends to stay popular over a really long time. But that's a user interface thing because we rank stories based on popularity too. And that means that they stuck into these rankings quite for a long time, because it's like an echo chamber. So there is many stories that do really well, but that's a small set of the whole thing. We don't see a lot of stuff from the archive at some point bumping up again. But maybe that's a problem that we can solve by changing the product.
The other question was, are you going to open it to freelancers?
I answered that. That was the second.
I beg your pardon.
It was short.
Right, let's move right on. Single item questions, please.
Hello, Alistair Reid from journalism.co.uk. My question is, it seems that the audience, from your perspectives at least, the audience is willing to pay for opinion pieces and long reads, whereas news and clickbait or social content, they're not paying for, so that might need to be ad funded. But what could or would that mean for kind of breaking up of the audience segmentation, and therefore the industry in the future, if that's the way those types of journalism will be funded? Could that lead to, or what's your take on that?
I'll go first. We typically kind of reject the notion that advertising is a nuisance. There is value in advertising. All of us live with advertising. We actually benefit from it in moderation, obviously. So we've always kind of believed that, and significant revenue of mainstream, including places like BuzzFeed, right, comes from advertising actually, not anything else. So we are not yet prepared to kind of give choices where it's ad-free, because we just don't think that that's actually useful to our readers as well. So the model has always been try to have as many streams of revenue as possible. Obviously, advertising, subscriptions, everybody's doing a bit of events and additional things like that. So the more streams of revenue you can have, if one is weaker than the other in a particular year, you might balance out. So that is the kind of the long-term goal. So we are not walking away from advertising or wanting to bring people back to an environment where they actually see the ads.
And I think that's a really good point, that getting people to pay for things directly is just one method of monetizing your content or your relationship with readers. And since no one's asked about GigOhm, I wanted to say that our model, which I do think could have worked, and in fact did work, was based on the relationship that you create with your readers around the content is what you monetize, not a specific piece of content. Apologies to Blendle, but I think if you are thinking properly about your relationship with your readers, that relationship can be monetized in a whole bunch of different ways. Only one of them is, could you pay us right now? One of them is, could you watch an ad? There are lots of others. And to Raju's point, you have to think about all of those things. You have to think about live events. You have to think about any way in which you can help your readers support what it is you do.
We don't make any real money from our live events, though. They're more, we use them to meet our readers, of course, and to make the membership more valuable. So
Right.
we always break.
But it increases that relationship.
But they
right?
deepen
It
the
deepens-
engagement.
Right.
They deepen the engagement.
It deepens the relationship.
So it's good for renewal rate as well.
Right.
Yeah, and at the same point, the new business models we're looking at are always coming to us intuitively. So, for example, one of our writers said, "I've been spending half a year now with my readers. So I'm working on some ideas. I'd like to elaborate on them in a book." And we figured, well, okay, you could go to a publisher, but we could publish it ourselves as well. Which we did, and we did all the things we want publishers to do. So we made the ebooks more affordable. We took away the security from ebooks. We also had print books, and sold over 10,000 copies, which is a lot in the Netherlands. And another thing is that we have our own speakers agency now, because our journalists get a lot of speaking requests, and normally they would go to an agent, and the agent would make all the money. Well, we're acting like their agent now, and an agent that is also thinking about their about what is good for them, because they're our people, so we can help them decide, and we ask a 20% commission for that, and the 80% goes to the journalist, him or herself. So we're not just monetizing on the stories, but also on the community and on our writers themselves and what they stand for. So who knows, maybe at some point we'll make documentaries if they ask for it.
There's also, just from a very high level, new business models that are emerging that are actually supporting journalism or vice versa, which is, so there were lots of businesses that used to be with us as publishers. I'm talking about travel, I'm talking about cars, talking about real estate, that have all over the years gone away and have become purely digital only transaction businesses, right? Cars.com, Zillow, and Trulia. What we are increasingly discovering is that those business models, which are purely transaction based, are finding that if they only rely on transactions, their customer engagement is very infrequent. So if you're a real estate company and you digitally allow people to buy and sell homes, in the US, if that's all you do, you may talk to the same customer once every 3 to 7 years, maybe. So what they're doing is increasingly surrounding transactions with content. So they're coming back into a business that they took away from in the first place. While publishers have tried to defend the declining classifieds and just defend it as opposed to doing anything. So increasingly we are kind of, at News Corp, for example, we are very big on digital real estate. We bought Realtor.com, we spent about $1 billion last year. What we are saying is that we have content, we have the customer engagement on a one-on-one basis. We can create compelling environments where people spend a lot of time. Why can't we go back and reacquire the transaction capability? Either build it or reacquire, ideally reacquire, because we're not good at building things. So we are going back into what used to be the classified spaces and reacquiring the capabilities. And collectively, this is a much stronger real estate business now, because you're seeing that trend. Those guys are all coming back into content. So it's something to think about in terms of like, are there business models that are adjacent to your journalism that you could perhaps reacquire that you used to have once?
Ernst-Jan, can I ask you, what if a brand came to you and said, we want to publish through the Correspondent, we want to be part of the platform? What would you say?
Thank you for your interest, but no thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course there are, so if I were that brand though, I ask my employees to share their knowledge in our comment section, and you can add an expertise title. So we sometimes see people from companies who are joining in and saying, well, I'm an accountant at Deloitte, for example, and then they're sharing their expertise with us, which we of course check, and that could be a way to profile yourself as a brand, but you can't pay for it.
Alexander, anything to add? No. Okay, next question. Right, down here in the middle. So I think this will probably be the last question, then we'll give everybody a chance to round up.
Hi, my name is Nicole He. I do journalism outreach at Kickstarter. So it seems that, in the journalism world and with probably all industries that are going through changes, it seems that kind of startups or new companies or smaller publications or maybe independent journalists are the ones that are trying the things that are, totally new and can kind of take larger risks. So my question is, do you think that these old traditional media institutions have an advantage in figuring out their future business models because they have the resources and perhaps like the higher stakes, or do you think they have a disadvantage because maybe they're less willing to try things that are totally crazy and out there that just might work for them?
Mathew.
Yeah, I might give a different answer than Raju will, but I think obviously there are different factors. Some traditional media entities, like say News Corp, have a lot of resources. Some do not. Some their resources are decreasing rapidly. So maybe their desperation level is rising. Desperation often encourages people to be more innovative because they're desperate. But I think in general, if you are digital first and digital only, and you are small and sort of nimble, you are always going to be better off than a large traditional entity, just because those huge machines take so long to do anything. It's not because people in those institutions are stupid or they're evil or they don't want to do things, that many of them do, but it's like they're trapped in amber or something, or they're all encased in a giant glacier and the thing is moving at like an inch every 50 years. It's just really, really difficult to do things within a giant entity. And so whenever you see those things happen, it's like a tiny little, shoot of green, like a little flower coming up through the cracks in the pavement or something. And you never know whether someone's going to step on it or it's going to die. Or I think it's just easier if you can change quickly and adapt, like say Blendle is. It's to see what is happening, to see what your readers or your users want, and then to be able to adapt to that quickly is the most important thing. And large institutions are just terrible at doing that.
I think most large institutions confuse longevity with relevance, right? Just existing seems to be kind of very, very important, while others have become more relevant. So I think that's something you have to fight against. Clearly, if you have a history and a legacy of doing something well, there's a built-in advantage because you can leverage that. But oftentimes, as Mathew was saying, that I think you do get kind of bogged down in the fact that a bulk of your resources or revenue, and take newspapers for example, right? Despite all the efforts digitally, most newspapers news organizations that have newspapers still make 50-60% of their revenue from the newspaper part of business. So it's very hard as custodians of that particular brand to be able to kind of ditch that and move to a phase of uncertainty. And that's why I think it takes time. But there's also a larger issue, right? I mean, I'm at News Corp, not directly involved with the Wall Street Journal anymore, but the Wall Street Journal is 126 years old this year. So my prism of decision making is, how do I, for however time I'm the custodian of the strategy of this company, how do I do something that leaves it in a better shape for somebody else coming along for the 150th anniversary, right? If I'm at BuzzFeed, if I'm at Vice, my exit strategy is very different, right? It's usually Disney or somebody buying you out in about 10 years with a lot of money. If that is my exit and that's my long-term plan, I make lots of decisions very differently. So I think by nature, big companies tend to kind of worry about kind of, how do we leave this intact or better? And that sometimes causes you to not take some of the risks that younger companies can take.
Ernst-Jan.
Oh yeah, I feel so relieved that I don't have to worry about a legacy anymore. It's one of the best things that happened to me in the last couple of years, because as Raju said, it's such a tough call that you still make millions from a print newspaper, and you have shareholders who want those millions, and you can't invest them in a digital future. I'm so glad I don't have any bad dreams about it anymore. That's all I can say.
At the same time, I'm still amazed by the journal, even in small countries like Holland, or even some bigger countries like France and Germany, the amazing amount of good journalism that's being written still in print newspapers, but also more and more in digital. It is something that we talk very negatively about, but it's something really, really to be cherished. And you talk about the indies, like they're doing the big work, but Blendle couldn't have existed if publishers didn't join up with us. And there were some very courageous Dutch publishers, especially in the beginning, where it was just an idea on a piece of paper, that said, all right, you guys go ahead, you just try this out. And even huge organizations like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times basically say the same thing to us. And without those publishers, we would be nothing. So at the same time, I understand what you're saying, but the willingness to experiment really this year, maybe especially this year, is so big that stuff can happen now. Maybe different than 1 year or 2 years ago.
I think in that description of the bold Dutch publishers, you may just have described the Dutch X Factor. Okay, I'm going to give each member of the panel a couple of minutes just to, if they would like, to sum up, come back on anything, mention anything they think you should have asked about but didn't, and then we'll wrap up. Mathew, to start.
I guess when you're a media entity of any kind, large, small, alternative, traditional, new, individual, I think your business models, that whole question sounds really complicated. It sounds like you have to be an accountant. It sounds like you have to figure out the entire value chain before you even start doing anything. I think in a lot of ways, if you have a very clear goal, if you are, say, passionate about a specific topic or a range of topics, and you focus intensely on that, and you do the best job you possibly can, and you focus on creating a relationship with readers or members who are also passionate about that topic, ways to monetize that will appear. I don't want to say it's magic, but if you create that strong relationship with your readers, they will volunteer to give you money. They will figure out ways to give you money. It's that relationship. That is you can come up with the business model and the pieces, and you can describe it on a flow chart, and it will fail. If you do not have that relationship with those readers, with that community, that's what you're monetizing, their trust in you. And if that isn't the first thing you're doing, you're going to fail. It doesn't matter what your model is.
Thank you, Raju.
Yeah, actually very similar point, which is that you have to kind of define what success means to you and then work back, as opposed to kind of trying to do everything everybody else is doing. And one big thing for publishers for me is that increasingly I think most of us have to move away from defining ourselves as only creating great content to kind of saying, how can I create a great experience with that content? Because the experience is still very proprietary, very defensible, and can be unique to you, even if the content becomes a commodity or everybody else jumps on the story that you have.
Ernst-Jan.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about starting a new journalism adventure, or you want to change your existing company, I salute you, and let's talk about it over an espresso. And please remember that you're not starting a publication, you are starting a movement. And a great way to start for us, and I think for a lot of other people, is with a crowdfunding campaign, because you only owe it to your readers then what you're going to do next. I wrote a short guide in preparation for this panel. It's, if you can show this, it's on Medium. If you Google it, or if you look up my Twitter feed, I'll tweet it later. You can see our 7 best practices from our crowdfunding campaign.
Oh, you got a number in your headline?
No, it's not in my headline, it's my subtitle.
Ah.
Yeah.
You'll never believe how.
Yeah. You'll never believe how we raised $1.7 million. No. It's all the mistakes we made. Please don't make them, and they're all in that post. And thank you very much.
Alexander.
Not much to add, except that I really hope that Blendle will look completely different in a year, and we will have found out that another thing that we just found out on a Friday afternoon, like we did with the refunds, was changing and defining how the product will look in a year. And that mindset is very fun. I have a lot of fun doing what we're doing, and that's in peace because we're willing to experiment so much. It's a fun thing to do, and I wish it to everyone to be able to do that.
Permanent revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, before I ask you to thank the panel, can I thank our live stream audience, our tireless interpreters, and you for coming. I've learned a great deal. I'm pretty confident and certain that you have. Please say thank you to today's speakers.
inzoomen. Als je,
Ja, vet hè?
Ja.